happens here is going to affect every other place in the world.
When stakes are so high, we will keep fighting.
You were born for this moment.
I'm ready to win.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
Tonight, despite efforts to cap insulin prices, many are struggling. How one family figured out a short-term solution. Then, could the answer to the opioid crisis be going after the dealers? And the end is almost in sight for California's devastating rains.
South Carolina will vote on Saturday, but on Sunday, I'll still be running for president. I'm not going anywhere.
I told you we'd be announcing sanctions on Russia. We'll have a major package announced on Friday.
I'm happy with the course I've taken. Disappointed at the state of Congress, though.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Both former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and former President Donald Trump are in South Carolina today, just 4 days out from the state's Republican primary. In a State of the Race speech, Haley vowed today to stay in the running past South Carolina. Coming up on Saturday, her team is also already planning a series of stops in-state across the United States ahead of Super Tuesday in early March. But it's not just the Republicans who are on the trail. President Joe Biden holding a fundraiser today in San Francisco after reporting a cash haul of $42 million just in January. He's also deployed one of his top campaign officials to Michigan, a key battleground. Re-election campaign co-chair Mitch Landrieu now attempting to quell concerns from some Arab American voters about the president's handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Let's begin this conversation with CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, great to have you here at the table. What's the significance of Mitch Landrieu going to Michigan?
Well, they've got a primary there in a week, and there are concerns, growing concerns, that a good number of Democrats in the state either will just not show up or potentially vote for this unique option that they have in Michigan called uncommitted, where they can essentially register officially their disapproval with their options. So Landrieu is there. The vice president will be there later this week. Congressman Ro Khanna of California, another key surrogate, also going out there to talk to University of Michigan students. All of it designed to shore up concerns that they may have out there, Democrats, about the president's ability to continue serving and the need to run up a big number for him there in a key battleground state next Tuesday night.
But how serious are the concerns about the president's handling of the Israel-Hamas war? Because on the other hand,
appreciate it. It has been great.
We want to take you now to Texas, where officials are updating the public on the search for an 11-year-old girl, Audrii Cunningham. She went missing last Thursday in Livingston, Texas. Let's listen in.
And to the community members who have been here supporting us since day one. I also want to say thank you to Trinity River Authority for lowering the water levels so that the divers could reach the area, areas of interest. But at this time, I sadly announced that Audrii's body was located at the Trinity River on the U.S. Highway 59. As a result of today's developments, I will discontinue the Amber Alert for Audrii, and I want to thank DPS, Department of Public Safety, for all their help in this alert. The information that we have gathered in this criminal investigation is substantial. The Polk County Sheriff's Office investigators, the Livingston Police Department, and the Texas Rangers, the game wardens, the FBI, Harris County Sheriff's Office, the San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office, the District Attorney's Office in Trinity County and Liberty County. It's just an outpouring of love from all of our law enforcement partners. My heart aches with this news, and I express with my deepest sympathies and condolences to everyone who knew, who cared for, and loved Audrii. The Sheriff's Office, we will continue to process the evidence that has been gathered to ensure that the justice for Audrii. And at this time, I will turn the podium over to the Polk County District Attorney, Ms. Shelley Sinton.
Thank you, Byron. My name is Shelley Sinton, and I am your Polk County District Attorney. I just want to take a few moments to explain how we're going to move forward from here. Based on all of the evidence that law enforcement has collected, they are in the process of preparing the appropriate arrest warrants for Don Stephen McDougal. At this time, we believe the appropriate arrest warrant is going to be for capital murder in the death of Audrii Cunningham. He is currently still in jail under an unrelated felony charge here. I understand that this is a very difficult time for Audrii's family and for our community. The substantial law enforcement resources that were marshaled by the Sheriff Lyons, I think, should show you that this county and law enforcement, they will come out when they need to protect our children. And the assets that we have been made available to Polk County to protect our children have been substantial. And at this point, as Sheriff Lyons said, he'll continue to collect the evidence and process that. The district attorney's office is going to stand right beside them and follow through, and we promise that you can assure that the district attorney's office will be just as dedicated to this case as every one of these law enforcement officers that are standing behind you to do what is right for Audrii and bring justice to our community. Thank you. At this time, if you've got some questions, we'll open it up to a few questions.
Any indication of how Audrii was killed?
I cannot speak to that.
At this time right now, we have transported Audrii down to the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office. At that time, we will await their results to be able to determine the cause and method of her death.
But evidence suggests murder.
We believe that there is enough evidence, yes.
Yes.
Did Don Stephen McDougal lead you to that location on the river where you found her body? Did he tell you where to find her?
That was evidence that we was collecting through the cell phone analysis, as well as through our videos that we were able to collect, and some of the information that we received from him, we were able to pinpoint and set. There were several points of interest that was turned over to us, so that we were able to develop. And thank goodness, and by the grace of God, one of those places of interest we were able to locate.
As I understand it.
What evidence links McDougal to the murder?
Evidence, and right now, folks, when we start talking about how we linking evidence to McDougal and linking evidence to this case, we want to be very careful on how we do that. I would feel safe to say this, is that there is substantial evidence through the evidence that we've gathered, and some of that evidence was even gathered by the wonderful witnesses and wonderful folks out there in the social media who sent us videos, who sent us pictures. Some of that, even that evidence helped us to be able to come up with these locations, as well as the evidence from cell phones and as videos to pinpoint these locations.
Can you tell us the condition of the 11-year-old's body and if she was dressed?
At this point right now, until we get all our information back from the medical examiner's office, we don't want to release any information concerning Audrii and condition of her body.
Sheriff, what directed you to that portion of I-59 and the Trinity River? What directed you to that area of I-59 and the Trinity River?
That area is one of the first areas of our concern points of interest when we started our search on Friday, midday Friday, and again, that's going to be developed from some of the evidence, and then yes, there was some points where he did give information, because there were several places that he said that he had went. So it wasn't a location where he said he took her, but there was a incidents where he said these were locations where he had gone.
Without this evidence that you talk about, would you have been able to find her where you found her? Without the evidence that you just described?
Yes.
You would have found her there?
We would have found her not through him, but we would have found it through the evidence that we collected from the analysis.
You have been watching Texas officials give an update on the search for a missing 11-year-old girl, Audrii Cunningham. Polk County officials now confirming that her body was found today. Officials also confirmed that they are preparing an arrest warrant for Don McDougal. The 42-year-old family friend had earlier been questioned as a person of interest in her disappearance. Audrii was last seen Thursday morning after she left to catch the school bus in the East Texas town of Livingston. That's about 70 miles northeast of Houston. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe and CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns join us now. Caitlin, it's great to see you. Ed's here at the table. You're in South Carolina. We were just talking about President Biden's reelection campaign. That's all unfolding as the South Carolina Republican primary heats up. Nikki Haley today saying she is staying in the race. Not a surprise, but why did the campaign, Caitlin, decide to have the former ambassador make that kind of statement today, days before the primary takes place?
Yeah, Bob and Ed, good to see you both. Well, this has been a question hovering over the campaign as she is poised to lose her home state here on Saturday. She's trailing in the polls by 30 points, and she's being asked over and over again, what is your path forward? I mean, we asked her yesterday, what state can you win? And she hasn't been able to describe exactly what that path forward would be, simply saying, I'm taking this state by state. We have to let the people vote. There have only been 3 contests so far. So the campaign kind of saw this as a moment to kind of address all of those questions and make it clear that she is committed to this through Super Tuesday. What I found interesting today, she repeated a lot of what she's been saying on the campaign trail, but interestingly today she talked about her own political future, and she said, I'm not going to kiss Donald Trump's ring, and I'm not concerned about my own political future. I'm not concerned about retribution from him. So kind of making this clear that she is kind of putting her campaign as kind of the last stand against Donald Trump, even as he looks well positioned here in South Carolina and beyond.
And in response, Trump campaign's spokesman Stephen Chung issued a tweet where he used a vulgar rephrasing of Nikki Haley's comment to say she ultimately will endorse Trump, in his opinion. Turning to you, Ed O'Keefe, President Biden today was asked about who he'd rather run against, Nikki Haley or Donald Trump, and he said, I don't care. What's the real view inside the White House about this Republican race?
They know how to run against Donald Trump and win, and I think they'd like to do it again. And they continue to show the incredible ability to raise so much money in the process of doing this. $42 million in January across his campaign, and 3 other essentially joint accounts that they have with the Democratic National Committee. He's going to raise another $10 million this week at 4 different events in California, I've just been told, a sign of the kind of money that's still out there and able to be given to these 4 accounts in a way that exceeds the normal federal limits that go to a traditional campaign. They're taking full advantage of it and having him raise as much of it as he can, even at a time when he's struggling in the polls to keep pace with the former president, or at least keep ahead of him. The fact that they're able to bank away that much money on the backs of what the former president's out there doing and saying, they believe is a sign that they're ready to go the distance, and that when former President Trump, is in courtrooms come the spring and the summer and struggling to pay for his legal issues plus his campaign, they will be in better shape operationally across the country and in the battleground states to churn out the voters they need, keep the president and vice president traveling and on the air.
Caitlin, in South Carolina, former President Donald Trump is ahead in the polls, but he doesn't seem to be taking victory for granted in South Carolina. His campaign has a new ad out targeting Haley. Let's take a look. So we just heard some of that campaign ad. I hope you heard it, Caitlin. I'm not sure if you did or not, but it was about Haley's position on the gasoline tax. How is she handling this latest attack from Trump?
Yeah, and this is something she's been kind of handling over the course of her campaign here, and she has called Donald Trump a liar for this. But what's interesting here, Bob, is exactly what you note, that they are not taking, the Trump campaign, not taking South Carolina for granted. He's here today, here in Greenville, where I am. And what's interesting is that they are, continuing to call for her to get out of the race because they also want to shore up this nomination and get on to the general election and be able to compete with the fundraising for those reasons that you just mentioned. We've talked to some Trump supporters today, too, that kind of noted that the longer Haley stays in, the more difficult it is for the party to financially rally around Donald Trump. So that's kind of one instance here. But, she's ignoring all of that and continuing on. She insists that they have enough money to stay through Super Tuesday, and that's usually kind of the sign of when campaigns fold. Yes, her path is extremely uphill, and the Trump campaign released a memo today saying that the math doesn't add up for Nikki Haley, and they're hoping that, or thinking that this nomination could be wrapped up by mid-March.
Ed, what's your assessment as a veteran political reporter about Haley's decision to stay in and the possibility that she stays in through Super Tuesday? Even if she doesn't win states, is she trying to accumulate delegates? Should Trump have some kind of problem down the line, or is it something else?
That seems to be the only logical explanation at this point, that if she can keep hitting 35, 40% in some of these states, there's at least some banked away that should something happen to him between now and convention time, she's got the argument to make that, well, I was the next one accruing the next biggest pot of them. Why not consider me? Beyond that, I don't know. But I heard her say, and Caitlin, correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm staying in this not just through Super Tuesday, but until every last vote has been cast in the Republican primary schedule. That would suggest going into April, May, early June even. And if she has the runway for that, then that appears to be the plan. And if she wants to continue billing herself as an insurance policy, well, okay. But that would require things to happen to the former president that may or may not happen, given the delays in his trials, as you know, that won't begin until late March at the earliest, and even then may not cause the kind of trouble that she or others might be hoping for. And what the other thing that strikes me is she continues to make almost the exact same argument she's been making the entire time, perhaps just a little sharper. I'm not one of the old guys. I won't cause chaos. I can beat the president. I can help Republicans win. But she's hitting a ceiling in South Carolina and probably everywhere else that the rest of the Republican electorate says, okay, fine, but we still want to go with him instead. So you wonder, to what extent will that succeed come Super Tuesday and beyond?
Caitlin, Ed mentioned some of the looming trials, especially on the federal level, January 6th, classified records, but there is a criminal trial in New York scheduled to start in late March. The hush money payments to Stormy Daniels from 2016 now under the spotlight by the district attorney in Manhattan, Alvin Bragg. That will be a 6-week trial. Behind the scenes, maybe not in her speech today, but behind the scenes, are Haley allies talking about that trial and the possibility of a Trump conviction come April or May or June in New York as a reason to stay in through at least the early summer?
Yeah, Bob, it's really interesting because that's kind of the shift that I noticed this week. Over the course of the campaign, as you both know, Donald Trump's rivals were really hesitant to criticize him over any of these trials. In fact, came to his defense on most of them because his supporters were too. But this week, we saw Nikki Haley really sharpen her attacks when it comes to the court cases, saying over and over again that he's going to be in court, not on the campaign trail. That's going to be a distraction. She hasn't really commented on the substance of the various trials and indictments, but she has, made this a key part of her stump speech here in South Carolina. The issue is, though, for her that it's not put any sort of dent in Donald Trump's support. Poll after poll shows about a 30-point lead for Donald Trump here, and those kinds of attacks just aren't, really penetrating here in South Carolina, where it very much feels more like his home state and not hers. So the play is for these Super Tuesday states, some of which have open primaries, but still it's important to remember that Donald Trump has not only such a hold on the base, but a hold on kind of state party infrastructure as well, and state officials. It's been notable, too, that Haley doesn't really have many, big-time surrogates out there for her in the party. She counts that as kind of a badge of honor, but that also speaks to the way in which Donald Trump really has shored up the Republican Party in his favor. And the RNC coming later, once he's the nominee, perhaps, is a good sign of that.
Caitlin Huey-Burns in South Carolina and Ed O'Keefe here in Washington. Thanks to you both for swinging by. We keep hearing about how high-profile House Republicans are retiring. We'll discuss what those exits mean for governing on Capitol Hill and for the Republican Party. That's next. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response? You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
Why?
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. Yeah, it's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
How can we become our best selves? That may be more about character than talent.
The ultimate mark of your potential is how far you've climbed, not how high you've gone.
Realizing your true potential with Adam Grant as we go person to person.
Welcome back to America Decides. House Republicans are now facing a wave of retirements amid dysfunction and infighting on Capitol Hill. The chairs of many important committees now say they don't plan on running for re-election. Major Garrett and Scott McFarland join us now. Major is CBS News' chief Washington correspondent. Scott is a CBS News congressional correspondent, two of the best in the business. Great to see both of you gentlemen here at the table. Major, I want to begin with a conversation you had with retiring Congressman Patrick McHenry. Let's listen.
What we've engaged in progressively with social media and where we are now politically is that the loudest, stupidest person is viewed as the most conservative or the most progressive or liberal. It has nothing to do with policy, has everything to do with style, has everything to do with scoring political points or raising political cash. And so if that's the whole goal, then you can have loud, stupid people on the left and the right that define the whole party.
Yes, loud and stupid people dominating politics in the House of Representatives. Patrick McHenry is an example of what you were just talking about in the lead-in. He is one of 5 sitting committee chairs who are not running for re-election. Now, in his case, he would have been term limited out of his chairmanship of the Financial Services Committee, but he is part of a brain drain of House Republicans, people who are on the policy side of the spectrum, who want to do things done, who know you have to compromise to get things done, who are visibly and audibly frustrated by this dynamic on the left and the right. But let's be honest, for the governing majority in the House, this is a Republican problem. People who showboat, who make noise, who say things that are disconnected from potential policy outcomes, but nevertheless achieve status, fundraising, and some manner of political power. And I think Patrick McHenry is not alone in thinking, I've seen enough of this.
What about the new speaker, Scott? Is he someone who these members who are retiring feel like he hasn't changed the culture to protect them, protect their ability to be policymakers. Help us understand, going from McCarthy to the new Speaker Johnson, how it's changed or not changed Capitol Hill.
That margin for error sure stayed the same. You can only lose 2 or 3 votes on anything, or the bill or the action is stalled. And I'm not sure anybody knows how to navigate that, be it Kevin McCarthy, Mike Johnson, or if there's a successor. And what struck me most over the past few weeks as these retirement announcements came is that it's not just the committee chair people. It's the committee chair people who had prosperous futures ahead of them in this system. The chair of the House Energy Committee had waited her whole career for that chairmanship. Kathy McMorris Rodgers, Washington State. She's retiring with time left ahead of that very powerful committee. But there's something else, perhaps more pernicious and telling about what's ahead. When you have only 2 or 3 seat margin for error, any 2 or 3 people can hold you hostage. They have veto power, and we became accustomed early, all of us did, to the Freedom Caucus members, the people I think Mr. McHenry would call noisemakers, using that power. But now it's everybody else, too. We have the New York moderates hold up a bill demanding a vote on a state and local tax issue. They're employing that veto power. And if the whole conference starts using it, I'm not sure what the speaker can do.
And as Patrick McHenry talked to me about, and this is on the takeout, which everyone will see later on this week, I said, is the House Republican Conference better off without Kevin McCarthy as Speaker than it was when he was Speaker? He said, no, it's worse off. I said, give me an example. He said, we've lost, meaning House Republicans, 5 rule votes since Kevin McCarthy was ousted as Speaker. He said, Speaker McCarthy lost no rule votes. That's a parliamentary thing that is of great significance to the majority party in the House. Rule votes set the rules for what's on the floor. How does something get on the floor? Because the majority party decides. The majority party also decides what the rules are going to be. If the majority party cannot enforce the rules, the majority party cannot govern. And what Patrick McHenry said is it is now an ungoverning House Republican majority. Everything else is sidelined by that simple fact.
So help us understand here, where does the real power lie in the U.S. House among Republicans? You've covered House Republicans going back to your book, The Enduring Majority, Newt Gingrich, 1994. You're on Capitol Hill almost every day, probably every day. No weekends off for you. But, okay, if it's not Speaker Johnson who's the center of power, is it former President Donald Trump who's driving House policy and House Republicans? Is it some television personality? Who is the real power player?
Seems to be 2 big answers to that. First of all, it's decentralized, and if nobody's in power, that's how things stall out. That's how you lose rule votes. That's how you have no plan forward for funding Ukraine or keeping the government open come March 1st. But it's not lost on anybody that the policy preferences of Donald Trump are being employed by a sizable, if not definitive, number of House Republicans. They don't like Ukraine aid. Donald Trump says he doesn't like the border deal. Let's get rid of the border deal. Donald Trump doesn't seem to mind the idea of a shutdown. They're almost inviting shutdowns for a 3rd time in 2 weeks. So it's pretty clear where a focus of power is. Just not sure anybody really has enough to exert.
And what feels like the inevitability of a Trump nomination to lead the party encourages, if not incentivizes, every House Republican to calculate every vote on any matter, whether it's legislative or procedural, through the prism of will this or likely or not likely create a primary campaign against me. All of that flows through the Trump wing of the party. All of that influences every House Republican, whether they're in leadership or rank and file.
And we're on the eve of congressional primary season. I mean, it starts in a matter of days in states like California. You can't get outflanked to the right now, not at this time in the calendar.
Does President Biden use this as part of his reelection campaign, this whole scene in the House GOP?
Oh, I think as a side issue, there are going to be bigger issues: abortion, the economy, democracy. But as a side issue, dysfunction, chaos, ungovernability, and a sense that even with a majority that they beg the country to give them, they don't know what to do with it.
And where are House Democrats? Is Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, is he building ties with Johnson, or is it just a standoff way far apart?
House Democrats will tell you Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic caucus are why the government's still open, why the debt ceiling wasn't breached, why all the blocking and tackling of government through the House is happening with a Democratic majority of votes on all these big bills. I got to tell you something to watch next week. March 1st is the first of 2 deadlines for a government shutdown. 1/3 of the government shuts down March 1st. The other 2/3, including the Pentagon, March 8th. It's almost as if they're willing to flirt with the first shutdown because the bigger stuff comes March 8th. That's going to be an issue. I think they may be more willing to breach this first deadline because it's smaller and because they've come so close 2 times already.
Think about this. The House Republicans, if they have a campaign slogan to keep the House Republican majority, it has to be something like this: re-elect us so we can share power with Democrats. That's the reality. That is how much they have, their own internal divisions have forced them to cave to an agenda that they don't actually prefer, because it's the only way to keep government functioning.
Sounds like a parliament. What's the actual majority now for Republicans with all these retirements and exits and George Santos?
It's fluid, isn't it? They got to fill another seat that was vacated by a Democrat near Buffalo. It should be a 3 votes to spare majority with George Santos' seat now flipped. But that's not a tenable majority. I mean, if you give 3 people veto power in any organization, be it the Youth Soccer League or Congress, they're going to employ it to get what they want. And I think Mike Johnson's up against it.
The politics of the Youth Soccer League. We'll leave that for the next American
Or condo boards. Stay away from them.
And Scott McFarland, thank you. Meanwhile, a new Alabama Supreme Court ruling could affect the laws related to in vitro fertilization. We'll discuss that decision next. You're streaming America Decides.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's a country music legend, philanthropist, fashion icon, and now rock star.
I think there's a lot to be said about being comfortable with who you are.
Find out what's next for Dolly Parton when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happiness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
A herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. The Alabama Supreme Court ruled last Friday that frozen embryos are now considered children under state law. It's a ruling that critics say could have implications for fertility treatments. CBS News political reporter Shauna Mizell joins us now. Shauna, thank you for being here. Tell us about the significance of this decision.
Yeah,
Yeah, so Bob, some families had actually brought this lawsuit after the embryos that they were storing were dropped and consequently destroyed. And they brought this lawsuit under the Wrongful Death of a Minor Act in Alabama. But a lower court judge in that state had said that embryos were not considered children. But the Alabama Supreme Court now reversing that decision could have some further implications looking forward.
As you look ahead down the horizon, what could those implications be, whether it's political or legal?
So reproductive rights advocates are now saying that this could have implications outside of the state of Alabama because the Supreme Court has now set a precedent. But in the state of Alabama, they are saying that the cost of IVF could increase significantly, as well as the costs affiliated with storing embryos.
How should we understand IVF treatment and IVF law as it relates to abortion rights and other areas of reproductive rights? Where does it fit in the current legal and political conversation? Because this is a lot of information for people to process. You usually hear about reproductive rights. Where does this fit in that broader conversation?
So when we're talking about reproductive rights, you're absolutely right. You don't hear a lot about IVF treatments, but it does all fall into that larger tent. And so advocates that are, really for enhancing protections as it relates to abortion will be talking about this as they begin and continue their talks when they talk about reproductive rights.
You cover politics for us so well. In 2022, we saw abortion rights become a galvanizing issue, not only for many Democratic voters, but for some so-called non-voters, people who often don't participate in the process. They came out in red states, traditionally Republican states, because abortion rights was often on the ballot across the political map. As we look ahead now to November and the 2024 election, where are you paying attention to in terms of abortion rights and the politics maybe changing the political nature of a state because of that issue?
So we will always be paying attention to battleground states, especially in a general election. So states like Arizona, Nevada, but even Florida, where there's efforts underway to put reproductive freedoms and protections to abortion on the ballot come this November, that could all have further implications as we look at the general election as well.
There was an intriguing report from the New York Times last week about how behind the scenes, not publicly in a campaign document, former President Trump talking about maybe taking a position around 15 or 16 weeks on abortion. That's in comparison to some conservative Republican governors who have advocated for 6 weeks as the time frame for the ban in their respective states. Where do you see that discussion in Republican politics going? Is it going to a longer time frame or not?
Well, Republicans are going to continuously now be asked about this time frame now that the Dobbs decision has come down. Before, it wasn't something that they really had to talk about. But I spoke to one Democratic source today who told me it really doesn't matter. Either way, Republicans are going to be pushing for restrictions, and that's something that they're going to aim to be highlighting as we look ahead to November. I spoke to one lawmaker who's running as a Democrat in Alabama for the House, and she told me that Alabama has now become ground zero for reproductive rights.
Shauna Mizell, we really appreciate you stopping by. We thank you so much for your reporting. And that does it for us today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.
Original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind.